Alright boys, BettrMMA is back, coming at you guys with the best MMA ASMR on MMA YouTube. And we're coming at you guys with a review, an assessment, and a look at where the 145-pound division is at right now. And I also want to make some broader takes in terms of how great the 145-pound division is. A major point that I want to make in this video is the fact that the 145-pound division may be the greatest division in the UFC right now, but also UFC history. And the case that I'm making for that right now is the fact that you have 4 people who have been the undisputed featherweight champion throughout the existence of the 145-pound belt. Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, and of course, Alexander Volkanovski. Now, what is very unique about this sort of circumstance, the UFC featherweight division has the fewest champions of any other division. The flyweight division has just passed up with having 5 champions, with Alexander Pantoja being the 5th champion of the flyweight division, and featherweight being around for a longer time than the flyweight division still has less champions. That speaks to the level of reign that each champion has been able to have at the featherweight division. If it shows us anything, it shows us that at this division, you need to have an exceptionally unique, high-level skill set, and at the same time essentially be flawless for your title run, or you will be swiftly taken out by the next contender. And I think it's very easy to say, oh, Demetrious Johnson is the GOAT because he was able to look so good against Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo earlier on in their careers. And as we see in Henry Cejudo's later stages of his career, he's really not as skilled as a lot of people think. As much as he wants to say triple C this, triple C that, he's not an extremely high IQ, well-rounded MMA fighter. He may be well-rounded, quote-unquote, in terms of having decent to more than decent striking if you're really willing to push it, and he has an Olympic-level wrestling base, so you can label him, quote-unquote, well-rounded, but he doesn't have near the clinch game or the explosive fast boxing or head movement as somebody like Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious Johnson was able to show throughout his career against guys like Ray Borg just how many levels above he was against the flyweight competition. But it really makes you think in terms of like a pound for pound sense. How would have Demetrious Johnson looked against Jose Aldo? How would a prime Demetrious Johnson look against an Alexander Volkanovski? Consider a 145-pound Demetrious Johnson fighting Alexander Volkanovski, or fighting a prime Jose Aldo, or a prime Max Holloway. Really think in your heads how that fight goes. Really try and imagine what that fight looks like. Because if you're thinking that it's going to look like the Ray Borg fight, or any of other Demetrious Johnson's masterclass performances, I think you'd be mistaken. But the point of this video that I really want to get to here is Ilia Topuria and where he stands in terms of potential legacy and what are his routes to victory here if he wishes to put himself atop of this featherweight Mount Rushmore that is the most stacked champions row of any UFC division in history. Of course, he just knocked out Alexander Volkanovski cold in the first round. I predicted that to happen, and I expect it to happen again if Volkanovski and Ilia fight again. I think the best fight for Ilia Topuria right now by far is Max Holloway, because Max Holloway is still very much in the prime of his career. After his performance at UFC 300, you could definitely say that this is a new peak for Max Holloway. You're seeing him at a very determined state in his career where he is fighting the best he's ever fought, which is crazy to say. Now is the best time for Ilia Topuria to fight Max Holloway because there's no excuses that can be given to Max Holloway at this point. Unless you're saying his cut back down to 145 is going to be bad, we shall see if that's the case. It's really hard to say who would win this fight because we have not seen Ilia put into a 5-round dogfight, which is something we are so accustomed to seeing Max Holloway in. So the prospects of Max Holloway dragging Ilia into a fight like that is very, very likely. It's unlikely that Ilia Topuria would put out Max Holloway in the first round the way that he did Alexander Volkanovski, mainly being that we've never seen Max Holloway put down to the ground, whereas we had seen Alexander Volkanovski just previously knocked out against Islam Makhachev. As an early prediction to that fight, I would have to pick Max Holloway over Ilia Topuria, simply because Max Holloway does have an underrated dynamic kicking game when it comes to his head kicks. He's very selective when he throws them, but as we've seen in Ilia Topuria's fight with Jai Herbert, as well as on the regional scene, he is open to lead leg kicks to the head, specifically against taller, lankier, rangy fighters. Now, that is something that is simply a stylistic disadvantage of Ilia Topuria, and that's something that I mentioned in my video about him. Ilia Topuria has nuclear power, great head movement, great ability to roll with shots, throw counter punches, solid wrestling, very good ground and pound. He has all of these tools to be a dominant champion, but he does have that one opening in his defense, and it has been found twice already. So I would predict his fight with Max Holloway being a knockdown, drag-out war where both of them get knocked down. If I know Max Holloway said that he got knocked down by Justin Gaethje, even though they technically called it a slip. But if there is anybody in the UFC right now who I would say has the potential to knock Max Holloway down, it would be Ilia Topuria. And this is because Ilia Topuria, in comparison to somebody like Justin Gaethje, uses his head movement and his footwork a lot better in terms of applying pressure and looking for his combinations. Justin Gaethje is a much more patient, standing up straight type of fighter with not a lot of head movement, and he's more so reacting to your movement in terms of what punches he's going to throw. Ilia Topuria is a much more initiative-styled fighter where he's going to use his head movement and his footwork to move into the distance and range that he wants and then unleash his combinations to the body and head, which we've seen him literally buzzsaw through the division and do. Max Holloway is known for having phenomenal footwork, and he's displayed that in all of his fights, and including his latest Justin Gaethje fight, avoiding Justin Gaethje's zone of death as well as he could. And I see him getting clipped by Ilia Topuria because Ilia is that good at tracking down his opponents. But I have so much confidence in Max Holloway's ability to be the matador in this situation. Now, this is the dynamic of this fight that really needs to be fought over. As I mentioned in my UFC 300 recap, Max Holloway beautifully displayed how to be the matador versus the bull in his fight with Justin Gaethje. He was able to be first and third perfectly all throughout the fight, popping Justin Gaethje at range. When Gaethje would return, Max Holloway is out of range, then he would pile back on with shots. I see this being the same sort of exchange that Max Holloway will have against Ilia Topuria. That is the fight that he needs to fight. He will also be able to use his kicks better at range and be able to fight better at range than Ilia Topuria in this fight, simply because he has better kicks at range and a more dynamic set of attacks. Max Holloway is far and away the hardest matchup for Ilia Topuria at 145 pounds right now. There is no clear-cut contender for Ilia Topuria to fight. Max Holloway is arguably the biggest superstar in the UFC right now, outside of Conor McGregor, of course, because of his UFC 300 performance. After that performance, you have people who never knew Max Holloway's name now saying his name. And that is a very big jump from UFC superstar to mainstream superstar. However, if Max Holloway is too aggressive, like he was in the third fight with Alexander Volkanovski, if he is over-aggressive and tries to walk down Ilia Topuria and be the aggressor in this fight, that is the biggest mistake that he can make. I feel like he's learned from that, because of his recent performance against Justin Gaethje, but we only know until they step into the octagon together. I've been thinking about the 145-pound division a lot lately. It's one of the few divisions where you truly have the highest level of hard-hitting pound-for-pound punchers, as well as the best volume strikers in the same division. When you really think about it, who are the hardest pound-for-pound punchers that everybody likes to mention? Josh Emmett, Jeremy Stevens, Ilia Topuria is in that conversation, if you ask me. Even though I think Topuria's power comes a lot more from technique rather than raw strength, like somebody like Emmett. But regardless, in the same division, you have the greatest volume striker of all time, Max Holloway. This is not a volume striker like Marc-Andre Barriault. You know what I mean? I love the power bar, Marc-Andre Barriault. No disrespect. But Max Holloway shows you what volume is. When you look up volume striker in the dictionary, you see Max Holloway styling on Cater and Ortega. You can have these longer, lankier guys in the division, but they're able to fill out their frames a little bit more. You know, somebody like Calvin Cater could realistically try and make 135 pounds, but he looks a lot better at 145 because out of camp, he's walking around at like 170, I bet. You know, Calvin Cater is a big dude. In real life, these guys like Calvin Cater, Josh Emmett, even Ilia Topuria, like I'm taller than all of these guys, but these guys are not small dudes, you know, by any sense of the imagination. And it's one of these really unique things when you consider that they're technically one of the lower weight divisions, but they do have some straight up real life monsters. I just really think there needs to be a lot more credit given to the featherweight division. I feel like the welterweight and lightweight divisions are considered the premier divisions, but if you think about it, it really should be the featherweight division in terms of the unique skill set that you need to have and the ability to rise above all of the unique skill sets in the featherweight division is an extremely hard thing to do because you're having to fight against the best of everything, essentially. Different type of video for you guys since there is no UFC this weekend, but the featherweight division is what I'm thinking about a lot recently, guys. We need to be giving it more credit, and there needs to be a lot more hype between this Ilia Topuria-Max Holloway fight. This is the biggest fight that I think we can make in the UFC right now. More than Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira, more than Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. This is the biggest fight that could be made in the UFC. BettrMMA, the best ASMR on MMA YouTube. This is what we do. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.